beginning, 9 years.
9 years, yeah. Wow, so he's gonna talk about, getting the ball rolling, issues with manufacturing management, getting into markets, trade shows, and all that good stuff. So we'll go ahead and start with the round robin, and everyone introduce yourself. Take about a minute to talk about what you got going on. Remember to not disclose your invention if you're not already planning or you haven't already disclosed it. So we'll start with you, John.
Okay, I'm John Wilbank. I work at a little product development startup in Bridge and called Trend Global. Anyway, we help people take their idea from sketch or whatever to making, finding factories and everything. Maybe build prototypes, do the factories, and anyway, eventually get it running. So, and then I have my own inventions and things that I've done, or mostly ones I'm still working on.
Good.
Have success on
So you're going to be a service provider to inventors, plus you've got some of your own inventions too.
well, and definitely. I'm kind of on the engineering side of it, so I build people
Okay.
prototypes and stuff is what I really like to do. And anyway,
Okay.
CAD work, stuff like that. But then, we have various invention ideas that I pursued that are different stages.
Great. Okay. Steve.
So my name's Steve, and I'm coming out with a new product called Big Squeeze. It's a tube squeezer. Gets everything out of metal, plastic, rigid plastic tubes, anything up to 3 inches, 3.1 inches. It's coming out. It's made in St. Louis. It's coming out in 3 weeks. Did a Kickstarter, raising funds, and so it's been a long journey. Like stuff we've been doing this for over 8 years. A bunch of it on the side, finally full time last year, and now finally getting ready to get my first order and send it out to my backers.
Okay. Did you meet your Kickstarter goal?
Yeah, I got part of it, but it wasn't my real goal.
Okay.
There's a Kickstarter goal and then there's a real goal.
Right.
In fact, I learned the hard way. On Kickstarter, you really don't want your goal more than like 10,000, 15,000.
Mhm.
You want to hit it in the first 2 days.
Right. Otherwise, you
Otherwise,
just
it's
don't
a grind to hit it, and because everybody wants to be on a winning team, and you get a lot of momentum that way, and so I had a hard time getting it, but I did finally get it. But it wasn't the actual tool was paid for, so I thought I had paid for it.
All right. Great.
Hello,
Jack.
my name is Jack Mulqueen, and I used to come to these meetings, I've been to one in like 20 years. Every month for about 5 years before that. I had a couple patent searches done through people in this organization. Nothing ever came of them.
See, you couldn't stay away from the inventing world.
Well, I moved away and I had some things to deal with, and just time for me to get back. Start thinking a different way, I guess. Like some ideas, move forward.
Okay. Good. day job's patent attorney and patent bureau and copyright questions. I'm a patent attorney, Roberto's a patent agent, patents, we do the same thing. Anyway, I'll introduce our speaker, Roger Baker, and take it away, please. Feel free to ask questions anytime during the presentation.
So we're going to be really casual. This is my first time I've ever presented this to a group. You learn that the more people you talk to, the better you get at bringing your ideas across. But what I do for a day job, if the mustache wasn't a big giveaway, I'm actually a Aurora fireman and a paramedic. So the storyline is, about 9 years ago, I was working with a medical device that we used a lot for. Sorry, Roger, you told me about the mic. They're called vacuum splints. So if somebody had broken their arm, you take this bean bag, essentially, a little valve on it, and you wrap it around, you secure it, and you take a little pump and you pump the air out of it. And what it did was, and it was the best, because it would mold to their arm, because broken arms typically aren't straight, but it would mold to them, and that was the best splinting support, the less pain, the least pain, painful option of a splint. And I'm like, what a great product. I think I could make a surfboard bag. It just have to be a lot bigger. And Roger and I talk about surfing a lot lately. He wants to learn how to surf better. But I grew up in Hawaii, surfed my whole life, still surf every year. I go to Indonesia. But taking boards back and forth on various planes was always the challenge, right? If your board is actually going to show up in one piece, or at least damaged to some degree. And so I started making these essentially large bean bags. And I'll pass a couple around so you get an idea how it works. So it's just a sealed, almost like a bladder. So inside are foam beads, different sizes, and actually what we found was patentable was the chambering of the beads. Because if you take, and this is what I discovered early on, is if you just take the bigger the bag, the worse it gets. If it's deflated, what happens is all the beads, it's gravity, beads will all fall down to the bottom. Well, that's not going to work, right? When I put something to protect, you'll have to smooth out the beads. So chambering was the next problem to fix. So came up with some ideas on that, and Roger helped me get the patents, and so we're up to 2 issued now and 1 pending. And so the bag itself, and you can see there's all kinds of options on sizes and thickness and what you want to protect. And so the original idea was surfboard bags. So I spent a couple of years probably, granted I was working full time, I have little kids, and of just trying to find the perfect material that was tough enough, but because it had to be airtight, and spending the money to find that material, and finally got to a point where it was just too expensive to continue to make samples out of all that material. And so I decided, somebody suggested, hey, why don't you just go smaller, do something different. So for the last couple of years, it's actually been gun bags. The first product being a pistol bag, and I'll get into that a little bit more later, but I'll show you kind of how it works. So it's nice and soft bag. You would put whatever you want to protect inside of it. Take a little pump, and pump the air out of it. So almost everybody thinks I'm putting air in, but it's actually just the opposite. So I'll kind of pass this around, you can get a good idea of it. So I've found all kinds of different little pumps, and this one's a little smaller, you know, a little more bag friendly, and so it kind of does the same thing. And so one of the first products was a little pistol bag, and just so happens an iPad fits in here real nice, so you can use different things. And what happened was, being a pistol bag, I thought I'd take it to a gun show. So there's a Tanner Gun Show, which they do quite often. And had a booth and had a friend that was a great presenter, and we grabbed hundreds of people and showed them how it worked. Everybody loved it, and we were just talking and talking, and after 2 days of talking to hundreds of people, and everybody loved it, you want to guess how many bags I sold? 0. And you think, well, maybe he's not a good salesman, but we were pitching it hard, but it's just. So I'm immediately thinking, oh, what a huge failure this is. You know, I was going in there thinking I'm not going to have enough bags to sell, and I'm disgusted with myself, and I'm freaking out. Going, what happened? When it finally dawned on me that was the absolute wrong market for this kind of a bag, because you know, our son, they're definitely a higher priced bag than you can buy the really cheap ones, $10. You know, I was selling these. The retail was $55, but we had show specials, and even reducing the price down to $35. Didn't sell a single one, and it just discovered that all the people that go to that show are bargain hunters. I mean, that's the kind of show it is. They're not there to spend much extra money, and most of them don't actually have the pistols that warrant that kind of protection level. So 0 bags. Oh man, that was a huge setback.
So what's the vacuum really does? It gives the rigidity? What's
Yeah.
the effect that
Right.
the rigidity
So
gives?
it goes from soft, and we can kind of do another demo.
Sure.
This is kind of the end. This is the product that's actually coming to market, and we can go over this in a little bit. So, what you place inside when it's soft, you cover it like a taco, right? You just fold it over, zip it up. When you take the air out, what happens is it shrinks down. There's about 10% shrinkage to the inside bag. It shrinks down to this being a gun bag or a compound bow. It shrinks down to it and creates a mold for the weapon, which allows you to not only, it gives it incredible protection, gives it a thick layer of impact absorbing protection, but it doesn't move inside the bag. So you can pick it up, throw it on your back. The gun doesn't slide down to the bottom. It doesn't move around when you're moving. And that's one of the coolest features that anybody that has a very high-end weapon, a very expensive weapon, can totally see the value in that. So that's the theory of the product, and it's one of the best features of what it does to protect, for this bag, a gun or a bow. But like many of you are probably thinking right now, there's probably 50 different applications. I mean, most people you can see it in their brain going, oh, that could be used for this or that, right? Like, which is one of the great things. Well, the good thing about this product is there's so many different uses, but then which one do you pick? Which one do you start out with? And I just happen to work with a bunch of gun guys that are really into guns, and it is a big market. so that's kind of what I started to doing with, but, so here's like a computer bag, you know, put your laptop in, does exactly the same thing.
After the Tanner gun show, how did it go over when you got home?
Yeah, it was, yeah, shocking, just as shocking to my wife, and, but what a great lesson to learn, that was not gonna be my primary product. So I then switched to big gun, basically long guns, which a lot of people, so it's know your market. A lot of people have very expensive rifles or shotguns or compound. It's amazing how expensive some bows can be, some hunting bows or competition bows. So it really was know your market, and but a great way to fail and figure it out and move on, and of course that all takes time and money, but yeah, so all different kinds of ideas on how to use the vacuum. I called it technology for a long time, and some people have a kind of a problem with, they think the word technology has to do with computers or electronics or an application, so I've been trying to get away from that. I don't know if you guys have any ideas on that, but I started calling it an innovation instead of a technology, because somebody immediately thinks it's got to be something electronic, and I don't know how you feel about that, but so somebody had an idea for a wine. You put your bottles of wine in here, and because one of the features of that bag is it's insulating, right? It's beads. It's like wall insulation. But not only does it insulate it can actually hold the bottles in place and protect them from being broken if you did drop it. So. I tell you, some of the greatest lessons learned is thinking you can do it all yourself, right? I thought I could research it on the internet. If I need it, because looking for the valve itself, it's a vacuum valve. Everybody makes inflation valves. I mean, there's a million of those, but very few deflation valves that are smaller and looking for less expensive. And so I figured if I just search the internet and look for products of vacuum valves, I'll eventually find what I need. And that's just not true. If I search the internet, I can find the right material. So I can do it myself. I can find this material. And it just, by doing that, I've discovered it's not good enough. You end up with materials, but you've spent a lot of money on it, and then it turns out not to be correct. So, again, something I should have done a long time ago, but it's kind of why we're here talking about it, is I finally went recently to International Fabrics Expo, trade show, and big lights going off. The people there knew it all. They knew. If I'd gone there 6 or 7 years ago, I'd have been 5 years ahead of what I am now, because they had all the answers. They knew it. They've worked with it. They've done it. They had all this, and oh yeah, we've done this many a time, and manufacturers, and so that was an amazing lesson to me of something I should have done a long time ago, is go visit the trade shows that your product is related to, and because the people there truly want to, at least what I found, truly want to help you out. They want to give you the information, because you could be a potential client, and if they didn't know it, I found they would take you to the next person that did, and so just really good information, and so highly recommend that. And
Do you find that this would be good in, say, a medical situation, or even a plane shipping
So the medical side already existed. That's kind of where I kind of got my idea from. The splints, the vacuum splints. That goes back all the way to the Korean War. They started using that idea.
But I'm not talking about the medical splint, I'm referring to shipment of medical supplies or valves or.
Right. So yes, that could be a massive application for keeping stuff safe while you're shipping. But I've always envisioned it would be, the market would have to be something where that's going back and forth. I just, not having enough research into how cheaply I could actually make one of these. I think you probably could make it cheap enough to use it as a one-way shipment device or application, but one market definitely is somebody that's shipping stuff back and forth, whether it's equipment or a electronics firm shipping a piece of something to this manufacturing, and then they have to send it back, or rentals and.
For warranty exchanges, they could do that.
Right. I literally have a list of 40-something, I think we're up to 48 now, that different applications for different products that could definitely use it, would be very useful for multiple industries. And so that's what's exciting about it, is a lot of different uses.
So are you selling it just online or in stores?
Yeah, so the first, it has taken an extremely long time to get the sewing end of this finally situated. I'm using a little sewing contractor here in Denver area, but because I'm starting up and I'm small, I am not a priority, and it's so frustrating when I say, hey, which is even a stretch, right? I'll take 100 bags. And a good example is they were supposed to have, and this is after delay after delay after delay, but they were supposed to have 100 bags done by beginning of August. And I just received my first dozen 2 weeks ago. Which one? This one.
So is that selling to the market?
So I hadn't done any marketing because I didn't have anything to sell. That made sense to me. I didn't want to market something and then not being able to deliver it, thinking that was actually worse than having a bad, it just didn't make sense to me. So now that I actually have them, the marketing strategy is, I have my own website, it sells on the website, it's for sale on the website. I have been taking the bags to professional guides and giving it basically to hunters and people to try them out, get their feedback on it, just as a testing, kind of beta testing the whole thing. The feedback has been amazing. It's all good. And then the next is to approach the gun ranges to see if they'll consign it or sell it. But one of the problems I'm having is I'm making it here, and I'm not scaled up big enough, and I'm making it with the best quality materials. So it's a very high-end bag, 4 1/4, which is way above typical gun bag pricing. It's not the highest by any means. There are gun bag manufacturers that make stuff in the $600, $700 range. But it's a high-end bag, and it costs about $200 to make.
One good thing about yours is that it would be a perfect fit for multiple guns.
Right.
And multiple different weapons. That's one thing that none of these other high-end bags is only going to be for the M1A, or it's only going to be for very specific, whereas this is non-specific
So, good segue into, I'll show you how this bag actually has turned out. So it only weighs 5 pounds, so it's super light. Simple backpack straps, some D-rings to attach to an ATV or horse or back of your truck. It's got just so many simple features. One thing that everybody's really liking is these are YKK water resistant zippers. They won't call them waterproof, but you can see they pretty much seal up, which, because of what's inside this bag, is the beads and the bladder, this thing, even fully loaded, will float like a champ. Sits right on top of the water. So now if you did happen to drop it in the water, if it got flipped around, so if you dropped it in a stream or something, if it got flipped around, and I've tested this, it doesn't, because of the zippers, water doesn't get in. Now you probably couldn't submerge it for very long because it eventually would find a leak, but that's a cool, again, this bag was designed as a high-end, kind of cool features kind of thing. So when you open it up, so this is pumped, it's already pumped out, so it's pretty rigid. You put your weapon in, close it up, pump it out, it molds to it. But you can also use this as a shooting mat. So you can lay down on this, and talk about comfortable, right? And you can actually adjust it to whatever, however firm or whatever you want. But it's also got this big pocket on the outside for all your extra gear. So extra magazines or extra tools, stuff like that. Well, if you can see, there's a problem with that because it's going to be on the ground and you're not going to have access to it. So, and I'm pretty sure, I didn't patent this, Roger, but I think I'm the only one that does this bag for a bag, but this panel folds out. So now everything is next to you. Whether you're left-handed or right-handed, doesn't matter, you just flip the bag around. So you have access to all your extra stuff. And then just simple elastic for putting in extra pieces and stuff you want to bring with you. And the valve is in the pocket. So here's your access. Like I said, if you want to put a different weapon in, you just let air back in, and it softens up. So if you added a scope or you added a different piece to your bow, but you still wanted to put it in the bag, you just make it soft again, re-deflate it, and you're good to go. No.
What was the name of the fabric expo?
International Fabrics Association International. They just had it in New Orleans. It was last week. Amazing information on not only fabrics, but all the manufacturing side of it. So all the welders, all the automatic cutting machines. It was incredible what those machines will do with regular fabrics, with the plastics, and they had all the different versions. They had fabrics with the sensors built into them. Just really kind of a fun show. I know it's just a fabric show, but got to meet some really cool people and got just tons of information on all that stuff. So.
Do they say you're meeting like agents and representatives of the contract manufacturers, where they actually do the manufacturing? Is it just anywhere in the world pretty much?
The companies, some of the machines were international. Some of the fabric supplier vendors were international, but quite a few were American. So there is a huge industry of textiles that are coming back to the States. So you can actually, this material right here is made here in the States. It's Cordura, and you can find a ton of companies that are coming back to the United States from Asia that, and from India that it's actually cheaper to get the old mills going and doing their own variations, it is truly incredible the innovations they have on, if you want a specific material to do exactly this kind of thing, you know, they do laminating, and so the possibilities of all that are absolutely incredible.
So the technology in cutting and all that kind of stuff, the laser cutting.
Yeah, the manufacturing side, the cutting and welding at the same time. I mean, just the laser, you basically, you know, laying out huge swaths of material, even 6 inches thick, and it'll cut by laser all your patterns in 5 minutes. I mean, the manufacturing side is just that much quicker and faster, and hot air welders to RF welders. I mean, there's all these applications, and being inventors, you guys can appreciate all the different things these machines could make.
As far as wholesaling, do you like to wholesale it to the stores, or?
So, yeah, so I didn't get to that. So, because it's so expensive to make, I almost can't wholesale it unless I made it overseas. To get to the price point that a retailer would want to get to, I wouldn't make any money. Honestly, my end goal is to be bought out. I think that's probably everybody's.
Have you thought about private label for high-end gun makers like Benelli or?
Exactly. So I had that idea, and then somebody kind of shot it down, so I kind of moved away from it. And then recently, actually at the show, I was talking to a product developer, and because my idea was to go to a gun bag, either a gun bag manufacturer, guys that already make the bags for guns, and say, hey, do you want to just incorporate this into your designs? Because they already have the retailers, they already have all that. But this developer's like, goes, no, you really should approach the actual gun manufacturers,
Would be a perfect fit.
because they have the money, they have all the money, and to take something innovative like this, they would and put slather their name on it, makes them innovative. And you know, how innovative can you get with a weapon? Not a whole lot. And but to add that bag feature to selling that comes with or part of their line is definitely my next step. So SHOT Show is coming up in third week in January, which is in Vegas. It's the biggest trade show for all things gun related. And I'm going to try ahead of time and get meetings with some of the bigger gun manufacturers and see if they'd be interested in pursuing something like that. So, but then it becomes, am I still the manufacturer? Do they want me to be the manufacturer?
They give you enough money, do you care?
No. Or do they want to just license it? Because they probably have people they know are manufacturing people that make bags already.
Behooves you to do it.
Yeah. I was kind of leaning away because I'd heard some horror stories, even from Roger, about licensing, and just recently got some more feedback, and it really isn't that bad if you write it correctly. If you write the licensing deal correctly, you can avoid so much of the headaches that people encounter. But it all comes down to that agreement.
Yeah, and what's the real end game? I mean, if you can work long-term agreements and relationship building things.
Back to this manufacturing. The chamber, do they build the chamber there? These people?
So I make the inner bags.
You make the,
Yeah.
you have the bags made somewhere?
So I make these myself in my basement. I am the manufacturing for this end of it. The sewers make everything else.
And then they cover it and then add it to it, is that right?
Right, so this,
All you do is give them the plastic bag, basically.
in fact, what I received from them is an empty bag. It's just the sewn bag. And I put the insert inside, which is, again, another design feature of this bag is you can take out the bag. So if it ever got a puncture or damaged or something, it just wasn't working anymore, I wanted to be able to take it out, whether it's a warranty issue or let them fix it themselves. I was gonna add a little kit, for holes, basically, kind of throw it in there. I wanted to be able to remove it, so it comes out. So you can fix it and stick it back in. If you wanted something thicker or thinner, you can always put something different in, giving you options. So I make the inside bag at home. But I just found at the show, I found a manufacturer in California that which again, that was what I said, they'd already been there, done that millions of times. They already knew exactly what I needed, how to do it. Everything I had been trying to figure out how to do, they already had the answers right off the bat. And so I sent them a sample, and they're gonna give me a quote on making the inner bag, but they also make the outer bag. They actually have sewing side of their factory. So, and they'll also sew, they have a sewing component in Mexico. So if I had a level of, because that's a whole nother idea, right? Do you have an economy version and then the high-end version? Where do you get that economy one made? You probably have all heard there's a lot of nightmares going overseas to Asia and China, especially something like this, like Roger says all the time. They'll find a way to copy it probably right away. So at least keeping it, not to say that Mexico's hugely better, but at least it's closer.
So you're not, I don't mean to interrupt this out. You're patenting the technology to the bag, and then you have a design patent on the bag itself?
No,
Is this something,
Um,
you didn't design it, or you did design it?
I designed everything about the bag with a lot of feedback from gun people and all that stuff. So the end result, I haven't bothered to design patent the fold-out panel, that's about the only unique part of the outer bag of what it does. So the reality is, if you call it an invention, I've really kind of like Greg, you said you do, just kind of see something existing and you improve on it. So I already saw something that was being used, but it had only been used for that market. So I'm taking something and using it for something else. So, but this invention, everything I've done is to build value in this, right? So you intellectual property it, that makes it more valuable, so nobody can just copy it, or not supposed to be able to copy it very well. So, and I'll tell you the reason I actually went for a second and the third pending. I had an experience with a development company here in Boulder that were in the bag industry. So these guys are like supposed to be the bag guys, so they had a great, absolutely amazing meeting with them, showed them what it did. They're like, this is the best thing ever. And I haven't seen anything like this in the bag industry ever. What a great idea. We'd love to see what we can do to have it made overseas. They signed a non-disclosure, but I hadn't talked to Roger at length about it, and so I had a simple form. So they have another meeting with one of their partners. Meeting went great, talked about branding and all this stuff. They sent it off to China and to see if they could manufacture the inner bag and the outer bag and see what it kind of cost. And then I heard nothing. Got nothing. So here's this company that's supposed to be incredible product developers, and and I get nothing back. So I'm emailing them, calling them, hey, what's going on? Can you update me? Well, we're having problems in the factory figuring out this or that, and it, of course, the red. I'm sure all of you are going, boom, huge light going off like red light. This is not a good thing by any means, and almost guaranteeing, I'm still to this day pretty sure they're going to try to copy it, do it their own way. I haven't seen it yet. Doesn't mean they're not trying it, but I wanted to. So immediately when that happened, I'm like, they're going to just make a variation of it. So I need to file for a second, and then file for the third to protect, to just get more variations of it protected, to keep guys like that from, because all of you can totally get that if you invent something, if somebody just boom takes it and God, how mad would that makes right.
Do you feel that you had a better NDA that you would have fared better?
So I even tried to, so I got a proper one, 4-pager from Roger, and I said, hey, let's try to move forward a little bit, I still think we could make this work, because they were it. That was my ticket, essentially. They were going to manufacture it, they were going to retail it, they were going to distribute it, everything. And so I said, hey, let's, after hearing nothing and finally getting some feedback and being pretty disgusted, I said, hey, we can still move forward, but we really need this proper documentation. We need to sign this 4-pager, essentially, and nothing. Never got it. Didn't even get a response. Didn't even get a response. So I'd asked them I said, hey, if we're going to do business, because they talked about basically partnering up with making a new company and all this. I said, well, hey, if we're going to partner up, I need to know a little bit more about you. What are your sales? So do you have more references? Do you have some financials? I mean, I really need to know that you guys are.
Do you know who the principals are?
I do. And he's like, well, okay, yeah, I'll get that to you in a week or so, and nothing. So scary, very upsetting. And you hope that they wouldn't do that. But I even asked him, right? I said, hey, I'm a little worried about you guys taking this and running with it without me. And they're like, nope, absolutely not. We're not going to do it. He says, funny line that he says, he goes, we wouldn't dare do that because of what you make, gun bags. He says, and you know where I live. So I kind of giving him the yeah. So, but again, they could be completely incompetent, or they're just doing it themselves.
When you pump that down, deflate it, and it stays indefinitely?
So as I've gotten better on the manufacturing side, because again, I'm doing it myself, some of the original bags had some leakage. My goal was for it to stay deflated for 24 hours. That's gone up to 48 hours, but I'm finding that with my new machines and stuff that I'm using, so far it's been pretty indefinite. A month, they'll stay deflated for a month. So quite a long time that I'm getting it more perfected. And
That's not affected by altitude?
so right, so anything that's inflated, if you go up in altitude, it's going to inflate some more, right? So the only opposite for this, since it's deflated, it might, if you put it up at altitude, it might actually inflate a little bit. So it may just get a little softer, but that's it.
How many have you sold so far?
one. Like I said, I've only just gotten them, and
Yeah, you just got the first 12.
right. So I've got one sold. I've got a lot of leads and a lot of feelers out there. I was interviewing videographers today. You probably all know you really need a good video, whether it's on your website or when I start marketing. Just something that makes you a legit product, and so interviewing those guys, and something I should have done a while ago, but
Maybe talk about the shipping companies that have sympathy would be a generic shipping bag, right?
right. So again, this cost a lot of money, just to figure out the manufacturing, just the materials. My plan of action was essentially create one product, stick with one product, get it in the marketplace, prove that it works, generate enough revenue back to start now. So I have, in some of the downtimes, created samples of different, shipping not being one of them, but just different, that list basically, creating samples of that. So if somebody said, hey, I'm in the wine bag industry, and or I'd really like a computer bag, so you should say, well, would something like this work, and trying to keep it available to people that might want to explore something like that. So,
And you're gonna eventually set up to have like a backup manufacturer in case?
right.
Yeah.
And it turns out there's, so to make this bag, I know there's nobody in Denver that is set up manufacturing this type of welding and that kind of factory setting for making bags like this. But they actually admitted there's 15 or 16 in the States that actually do this, do all the welding and do all that. So,
Are you just heat sealing it right now?
yeah. I actually bought it. It's an industrial machine. It's an RF welder, radio frequency welder. And this company that sells me the valves, they have the mold for RF welding. So I literally put the flange in and it welds it, which that was huge in my air leak problem, because it doesn't get any better than RF welding. That is the best way to seal plastic, is radio frequency welding.
Can we run over there?
What's that?
Can you drive over the top of it?
I'm sure you could. Because something that's actually come up is, will the beads crush? And I haven't found that to be the case yet. I imagine if you put enough pressure on it, they might flatten to some point. But if that did happen, there are options on the beads. They make stronger ones or more ones that are a little more bounce back. Technical term.
They're kind of they're angular shape, they're not symmetric, so when they shrink down, they interlock to one another, so they're not round beads. They're kind of like
And they're different sizes.
battleships, but that's how they work. So when the beauty of it, even if it leaks, you still have some cushion.
Right, so, which is another point, I had to test the surfboard bags. So I bought, when I was in Bali, I bought the cheapest, thinnest, most fragile surfboard I could find. And that was gonna be my test subject, essentially. So I stuck it in my surfboard bag, took it down to another island, brought it back. So baggage handlers galore, right? And then brought it all the way back to the States. And when I got it back to the States, the bag had not held air well enough, or not held it in. So it had become soft again. But I opened the bag and the board itself, not a scratch, not even the smallest little ding, little dent in it. So it proved to me that it doesn't necessarily have to be deflated to be truly effective. I mean, I'm sure there is that value of it being compressed that gives it more shock value, but it doesn't require it.
So basically you can everything on the distribution of the beans, right?
Right.
Yes, right. That's the challenge.
So now I have to figure out which way to go. One of the ideas, and probably the best idea, is go into the gun manufacturers. But even that's one market that I can approach. And do I approach?
And they have a world market, and it's a prestige of owning, whether it's a SIG or Locker, or even whatever brand it is, they have certain aficionados that are just, but Beretta's been around longer than anybody. And so that's their push, is that they are the oldest gun manufacturer in the world. Their stuff is unmatched.
Hopefully I can get a meeting with them and some of the, well, anybody though.
And then the English long guns, they're $20,000, $30,000, or you could sell to like the ski people. My uncle was a ski shooter, and his guns were $25,000, $30,000. Crazy.
So there's a market,
I don't think at $800 would be too expensive.
right? Because some people have said 4 1/4 is not expensive enough
That's true.
for that market.
True premium market, maybe that gives them room to price you into the whole thing. I do have a couple, I have a name of some professional dealers.
Okay. I've really been thinking about finding someone else. And if this California company comes through, it'll be interesting. But that'll take that whole manufacturing side away from me, which would be massive. Because then I could just concentrate on the marketing.
Really important.
Yeah. Selling them. So this is a 40-inch. It's 40 by 15, and it'll hold most AR, which is a short term for assault rifle weapons, or really short guns, but also fit a compound bow. Now the majority of the guns out there are actually need a longer bag, so the next version already have the patterns and they're ready to cut those patterns as a 48-inch. It'll just be a longer version of this, exactly the same bag. But, and then the pistol bag that I make the newer one has a pocket on it that hides the valve, and so that would be like an add-on. So if somebody really liked this idea and they wanted to protect their pistol, then they have the option of buying that. But making it my primary market was not. That was a big learning experience. So.
I really like that product because of its versatility, how many places it can go. I mean, you're talking about a gun bag, that really doesn't interest me, but some of the other things that it does do, that's kind of more interesting.
And the way the patent's written is extremely important. So Roger has written it. There's no restriction on how thick I make it. So my first ones, so the first bags I made for this bigger version were this thickness. What I found, it wasn't molding enough to the gun, so the gun could slipping out. So now I have a thicker version that's a third thicker, and that's working great. But I also have a version that's actually that thick. So you imagine if you had to protect something really sensitive and really want it to mold, something that thick is demonstratable, is just, people love it. I mean, they just like, whoa. That's, because it's so much more dramatic when you pump that out in it. You know, it's that thick. So
Are the beads compressible or not, or they're rigid?
you can put them in your finger. And,
Actually,
no, they're not rigid,
they're not
which makes them
kind of
super light.
soft and light.
You know, if you felt the bag at all, this
Right.
weighs nothing. Which is a huge advantage of this bag over, because my biggest competitor is the Pelican cases, the hard cases, for protection. But those are so heavy, so incredibly heavy. And my advantage is you can put anything you want in it, in the bag. In a Pelican case, give an example, a Pelican gun case, you pull the foam out of it, and it's just that weapon. That's it. You cannot, the only way you can change that is to buy all new foam. And I've heard that to buy just the replacement foam for a Pelican case is like $80, just for the foam. So, of course, then somebody suggested, well, make a bag that fits in the Pelican cases, because then you've solved that problem. You can put anything you want in there all day long, still have the Pelican case, and then maybe Pelican buys me out. But
Have you thought of like cameras or telescopes?
yes, so I talking to the videographers today, they can totally see being able to use it. I haven't been able to wrap my mind around how, because I'm not a camera person, how to actually design the bag to protect the pieces of what they have. But absolutely, sound equipment. I mean, skis, snowboards, professional hockey sticks. I mean, these are all the things on the list. Musical instruments. If you're traveling with a musical instrument, right, from high end to even some of the lower ends, because it's really not expensive to make this material. But musical instruments, brass, any of that, violins, what a great way to protect your stuff. So there's all kinds of possibilities. Did I answer that question?
So if you started today, what would you do different? What would you learn?
I'd go to the trade show first thing. So
Getting the manufacturing lined out is so important.
this manufacturer, because from the beginning, one of my goals is to find the right material. So it has to be airtight, obviously, but it has to be tough. It has to be abrasion resistant, cut resistant, puncture resistant, something that's isn't just gonna get a hole in it right away. And like everybody has those vacuum bags, right? You put the pillow in, they don't really last. They always get a hole somewhere. So I had to create something, materials, but finding that material. So this manufacturer that I just sent a sample to already makes a bag that inflates for guns. So theirs is an inflatable bladder bag that inflates around your weapon. So this manufacturer says, I said, can we use what they use? He wouldn't tell me what it was. He goes, absolutely. So I've just basically solved that problem with one guy. Hopefully the manufacturing, depends on the pricing that comes back, and what to use for the material. And because if you're inflating it and it's tough enough to last, it's got to be tough enough for a deflation bag, which would probably take less abuse than an inflated one. So
To get it out to the market, wholesaling versus
It-
most sports, is there a way that you can cost reduce it by either volume purchases or having to go overseas, like to Mexico or?
yeah, maybe you can tell me differently, but I think retailers would want a price point that would be more lucrative for the mass. Which retailers, that's what their audience is. It's the mass market. It's the general buyer. You and I, just not typically the real high-end clients. So Cabela's and Bass Pro, those guys. They might have some high-end stuff, but, so to make it cheap enough for that,
They second source.
yeah, you'd have to probably make it outside the country, and whether that was Mexico. And that's, again, that's gonna be great to see what this manufacturer comes back with on pricing. Because I asked them to price what it would do for Mexico, and, because the retailers don't care. They don't care that it's made in the States. They could care less. They just want, it's the margins. But we've taken it to Cabela's, to the gun guys, all the guys that work there. They love it. When can we get it in the store? You know, when can we start selling these things? But getting an audience with the buyers, that's a whole different ballgame. We've been trying, but it's just, it's almost, yeah, the guys that actually buy bags. Bass Pro, same thing. I got a lot of my design ideas from the guys behind the gun counters. And so they were instrumental in how I designed the bag itself, but bringing the finished product, they loved it. They'd love to sell it. But again, getting Bass Pro is $1.6 billion retailer. Trying to get your product, I'm sure, in front of,
Think about more specialized,
right.
you know, maybe going to something like Bluecor, those guys that were professionals. I mean, you can grow smartly there, and, you know, Bass Pro would probably take you to the cleaners.
Don't want to do Walmart, you know.
You really want to get to the cleaners.
Exactly. I've heard Cabela's, you know, you hear the stories. Cabela's will take your product and boom, turn around and counterfeit it, then cancel your contract. Bring in their own version of it. Oh, yeah. So the get around to that is actually just go to the gun manufacturers, put their name on it, and let them deal with it. Because they're not going to take any, they have the way to protect, yeah, to protect their own interests. Because whoever gets this and puts it in a bag is going to get some, you know, some market share.
Prestige of having something new and innovative versus going to Walmart. You're not gonna probably buy Berettas or.
Exactly. How many of you had products and somebody goes, "You've got to go on Shark Tank," right?
So have you ever read anything about Shark Tank? They own you even if they don't use you. The company that does the production puts your stuff out there and they get a percentage of it before you even go out there.
If they agree to let you on the show. Yeah, I have heard that. I've heard it takes 6 months, even after getting a show deal.
Someone was talking about it, they said the biggest product to come out of Shark Tank was a sponge.
That was the face sponge.
Sponge daddy, that's it.
So I went and auditioned when they were here in Denver
Oh, yeah?
this summer. Thought it would be a piece of cake. Really didn't think I would be too nervous about it. And, no, I'm a paramedic. I go fight fires. I can take care of people that are in the worst way and do it every day. But when it got to the point where in front of this casting person, I totally locked up. Because it really is a huge deal. You can tell yourself, it's no big deal. But if you do get on, despite them taking a percentage, you're instantly made, whether you get a deal or not. That's just a fact. So it is a big deal, and I subconsciously, and I might try it again, who knows? I was hoping that they would love the product. Because you're thinking it's a show for the products, right? No, they just want personality. They want somebody that, boom, boom, you know, hey, right? That's what they're looking for. They're looking for the show. And what I learned about Shark Tank is we see 2 minutes of it, of an interaction. The minimum time that those people spend in front of the sharks is 40 minutes. Up to 4 or 5 hours, they've said, of back and forth. Yeah.
They just cut it down.
There's 78 cameras or something like that. So they have every angle covered, and they go back and just knock it all down to 2 minutes. I'm like, I could maybe do 2 minutes in front of those guys, but 40 minutes? That'd be a whole different. You really better know your, and of course we all know, if you watch the show, you have to know your stuff, or they just kill you. But that was an experience.
So do you have a little demo of anything that would kind of, that would work here to see? I would just love to see it.
Oh, yeah.
One of the bags, stick something in and.
So when you sell them, you find a pump to sell, to include?
The pump comes with it.
Yeah,
There's the other challenge. Nobody makes a decent pump.
yeah.
And you can only get these in China. They're all, unfortunately for me, I have a high-priced bag, but I cannot find a pump that's decent, a well-made pump. It just doesn't exist. I've asked different companies if they might make one, and I'm not interested, because I don't have the volumes yet or anything. And to actually tool to make one or build my own was way too expensive for me. But I'm sure a bigger company that wanted to do that could just instantly. They would know how and who, and well, you could probably CAD one and prototype one pretty quick, and so that because
It's the manufacturing and then you do need volume. I mean, that's just
the
the reality.
tooling is what's the expensive part, right? So.
I mean, there's gotta be a minimum of something, at least, 5,000.
Oh, you can see the wow, yes, really. Make the bit.
into it. So, I wrote some notes, I just want to make sure it kind of covered. Yeah, it's pretty much, hopefully covered enough that makes sense to all of you. Thanks for your patience. I never presented like this. At the Shark Tank thing, I had 1 minute. Can you imagine? How do you get an idea like this in 1 minute? Oh, God. So,
How long did it wait to get a 1 minute of Shark Tank?
it was, I think I showed up at 8:30 in the morning to get in line and didn't present till 3:45. And I was halfway up in the line. I wasn't in the back of the line by any means. I was kind of halfway probably. It is a long day. Lots of trying to practice my script and then.
Well, they feed you guys for lunch?
Yeah, they take good care of making sure you're fed and.
They can afford it.
Yeah, exactly. So that was quite the experience. I could have had my buddy do it, somebody that is, we all know those people that if you're not one yourself that can just talk and do your presentations, people that are just on it, right? Could have had somebody do it. Thought I would be fine. Interesting. But, so now I have all kinds of options on which way to go, and you just kind of, right, just keep plugging away until somebody goes, I like it. And then you go from there. And hope, so far, the feedback I've gotten is I'm well protected, which just adds value. So, which I never quite finished what I was saying about that is everything I've done is add value. So the licensing, the trademark, not licensing, but the patent stuff. But what really adds value, and again, you guys have all heard this, is actually having a working product in the marketplace that takes a chunk, or gets enough interest that the big guys go, hey, what do you got? Something that's already proven itself that the consumer wants. They love it. They think it's awesome. You just doubled or tripled the value of your licensing deal or a buyout. So, but it's tough because you have to get to that point where you're selling a bunch of them. You have to do all the marketing and all the product development. But another thing I'd say, try not to get discouraged if you're trying to do a product. I used to get really upset with myself because I wasn't making much progress. Things are taking too long. It should be already out there. And my best friend says, hey, because you work full-time, more than full-time, you got 2 little kids at home, and so if this was your full-time job, just doing this, yeah, you should be way ahead. But when do you find time to do all of this and work? And so he says, don't feel bad. He says, just do it when you can, and it'll just take time. So don't get discouraged with yourself.
Is there any money you consider partnering with?
Yes, again, it comes down to value, right? As soon as you start partnering or taking in investors, you've devalued your interest in whatever you end up getting a deal with. I always thought that maybe one of the investor groups, or what do they call those guys, the angels investors, might be a way to go. Until I ran into a friend from church that had been through that, and he's like, "Don't do it." He says, "You think dealing with manufacturing and all these other companies is bad. Wait, this angel investor is actually worse. You spend more time with them, dealing with them, than you actually do with actually running your company." He said they're a nightmare, and if they even walk away, because they expect to walk away on like 80% of the stuff they invest in. But even if they walk away, they still own your percentage of your company. So you still have to pay them if you end up getting a good deal or getting a deal out of it. Granted, you got some money out of them in the beginning, but again, those people are as much work as much as running your company. I think this is what I was told. And the real horror story is that they'll actually take over, completely kick you out of the whole thing, and try and figure out a way to not pay you at all and just take over, that would be a huge nightmare.
How did you deal with funding?
I just all myself. Paychecks and loans and home equity loan. It's been quite a bit of money, but it's the faith. You got to keep the faith that it's going to pay out. It's got to pay out, right, someday. Because I've thought about quitting. I'm like, maybe I'll just put this aside for a year. Just let it sit. But it's really, it's my product. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's a neat idea that I'll actually do well in the marketplace, and so I just keep plugging away, just hopefully. And I've run into some of the most amazing people that have the most potential for taking it to the next level, and they don't pan out. They just boom, they disappear, or nothing comes of it, and you're like, thought it was it. But you got to keep going.
The very first group in Boulder that were supposed to take care of manufacturing and stuff, how did you hear about them?
A friend of a friend, right? It was amazing. We were having a birthday party for some friends that were from California, out of town, at our house. One of their friends came to our house. It turns out he was the head buyer for, it's a store that's in Littleton on Santa Fe. It's an outdoor retailer, basically.
Near Aspen Grove?
Yeah, in Aspen Grove. I forget what I just can't never remember what the name of them is. So he was their head buyer they sold bags. They sold all things sporting good stuff and bags and all this stuff. And so I'm just showing the bag to my buddy, who's from California, hasn't seen it, and this guy's sitting there, not saying a word, and then it turns out he's this bigwig in the market, in that space, that retail space, and he's like, "I love this thing. This thing is amazing." He goes, "I know just the guys you need to talk to," right? So, because in his dealings, he dealt with those guys that were in the industry, and so he made a phone call, and that's how I ended up meeting those guys, and it just sucks. It didn't pan out, but
Did they want any upfront money or anything, or
no.
it was just talk?
I still cannot wrap my hand around, because if they've made it this far in business, that they can't be that much of an idiot not to even call me back or answer any emails or be that excited about it and then just get nothing from them.
Did you have the patents at that point?
Yeah. I had the first one. But that's what made me think, the variations. They're just going to do a variation of it, which is classic, right? That's what because mine had been issued and published. So
But you're a utility, so for them to do design around it, that's a blatant infringement.
absolutely. And
I know a good patent attorney can help.
yeah, right. So And it's triple damages if they knowingly do it to you. So, but here's a company that is a product developer. All they have to do is have a buddy do it. And they try to hide that connection. And so they had to be thinking about ripping it off.
When did they stop responding? Earlier this year?
It would have been early last year.
Oh, it's been a long time.
It's been a year. It's been over a year. And just
Your filing is only in the United States.
yeah. That's another thing. If you need to file international, which I probably should have, you have to do that in a certain timeline, and I missed those dates. I missed those timelines. So you have to file internationally before
Unless it's Chelsea.
then it doesn't matter anyway.
Plus the time is ticking on the buttons also, right?
Exactly, right? On the first one, it's already been a couple of years of development.
You gotta get the right stamp if you're gonna go to China. So it's in the People's Republic, and they have to have it stamped. So they don't recognize anything in the United States over there. So there's a company was that one of the patent, did you go to the thing last week? At the USPTO where they were talking about dealing with China?
Yeah, they had that presentation about once a year,
Yeah,
but it's supposedly getting better.
that's what they keep saying.
Yeah, that's what
So
he's saying.
And you'll win 1,000 or what they say, $1 million, whatever the Chinese, but it's like $80,000. So of course you can lose there. They don't care. They'll pay you damages there.
Interesting, talking to the manufacturers. Granted, they're American manufacturers, but they're saying like for this inner bag, you wouldn't want it made overseas, just truly for quality issues. And it can actually be cheaper because this technology is not all that difficult. The machines already exist in here, and there isn't a whole lot of labor to it. So making it here actually makes more sense because you're not dealing with shipping, and then you're not dealing with any problems with quality because you're right there. You order 10,000 of them, they show up in the U.S. and they all fail. You're stuck. There's no recourse to that. But it's been my strategy as long as everything's been made here, which I think, granted, being a fireman, I think it's important. I just think it's a good idea. It makes it more expensive, but I like the fact that I'm making it all here and trying to source as much as I can.
It's hard to do though.
It is.
My product is one of them's a medicine ball, so there's a fabric shell to it. To sew that in the US is $80 to $90. Overseas, $12.
Yeah.
So, it goes back to if you sell the same kind of margins, then you're saying 200 to 425. If you're gonna sew that back, I don't know, 20 or $30 overseas. So instead of 200, it may be, like I said, 20, 30, $40.
Yeah,
So
or
now
less.
you're talking $150 in savings,
That's more money in your pocket.
which goes to margins and stuff, and it's just basically a labor thing.
It is.
It's the same amount of time to sew, and you're just paying somebody a fraction of $1 an hour in another country, which is hopefully a livable wage if it's a responsible company, versus paying a $50 loaded salary in the US.
Well, you have to understand stuff that they make overseas, there's no OSHA, there's no EPA. I've heard Beijing is like toxic, the air is so bad. So
So I just thought of something that came up recently. I had a couple days ago a discussion with a product developer, a friend of a friend, works out of Vietnam a lot. Basically, is in Vietnam, making sure his products are made correctly. He says you've got to be there basically when they're producing, otherwise it's going to turn out crap.
Before they ship it.
Yeah. So, but he's total talker. Loved it because he doesn't know me. He understands kind of my product a little bit, but he is basically going over the goods and bads of product development, what strategies and stuff. And one of the biggest things he said to me was, not talking to me directly, he said, listen, he says, one of the biggest failures for a lot of these new products is trying to make it too perfect. He goes, huge failure rate when you just think you have to have it absolutely perfect. He says, you know how many guys go bankrupt doing that? They'll spend so much money they can't move on. He says, you don't have to make it perfect, which of course it's all coming back to me. I'm like, everything I've done on this bag has been to make it as perfect as possible. The highest end zipper, the best bag sewers. And I'm like, whoa, huge, mind check. Am I doing this correctly? And then the easy answer to that is coming up with different levels of product.
Good, better, best.
Yeah, economy versus the Cadillac, and that's absolutely a market strategy that
Yeah.
you can do. And
Well, and doing 100 units here in the U.S., they may cost you $200, but you've got the control. You can go down there and see them and all that, and that's 100 units. That it's not what you want to be doing in 3 years,
right,
but you can get to there in 3 more steps. So you take the low margins for a while.
which it's the ends to the means. It's making it here in the States, which is there's a bit of a
If you get big too, then going overseas isn't the only way to volume. I mean, with something like this, you'd be able to automate,
exactly.
and you could get, again, probably a lot more cost, somewhat cost.
So yeah, don't have to make it perfect because you spend so much money doing that, and I have. It's just trying to get this all just right.
Need to stay deflated anyhow, that's the.
Right, that's-
your big.
That's what it all comes back to, right? Is it's not this piece of it is not actually what I'm trying to sell to everybody. It's this is what it really is the innovative new piece of all of it. So here I'm spending all this time trying to make this the perfect shell, essentially. When people could care less, they like the idea of what it does. Whether I put a cheap shell over it or not, it still does the same thing. So that was a big light bulb moment. So, trade shows. Go to the trade shows if you can.
You went there just as an attendee.
Yeah, and then even that didn't cost me, to get into the show didn't cost me a dime, because usually one of the or somebody that's presenting and that has a booth in the show will just, you'd be an invitee, exactly. And you just write them, hey, I'd love to attend the show, can I get a invitee badge, essentially? Absolutely. So
Come see us.
I took my son with me, and so I just wrote YKK because they had a booth. Yep, here you go. Didn't cost a dime. So just airfare and hotel. So
Vacation for yourself.
we had a good time. It was fun. Thank you.